Oh, I'm in the presence of greatness. Hi, hello. Anybody else recorded any formal content or just done anything on a daylight savings day? Yeah, how did that go for you? Because I was just setting this thing up for like to half an hour. Just in order for the chair not to squeak, so I had to change the chair and I had to change the light, height, the microphone. But hey, at least me and microphone are like half a meter away from each other now. It's very personal up here. You do not give a hell. Hi, welcome. My name is Maja. This is Gone Bad. It's a series that comes out on Wednesdays. And it covers people that have done ordinary things, they have followed an ordinary normal people path and then have suddenly switched to crime. Usually those people have also done ordinary jobs. So I've covered a killer police officer, I've covered a killer nun as well. So, maybe not like ordinary. So I thought I researched the case of a killer daughter, Jennifer Pan, like months ago, and then I just never covered it on this channel. I put it on Patreon. You can check my Patreon. It's like the podcast Patreon episodes. So there is like a backlog of a couple of minisodes there. So I just sort of like went back to that research because I didn't know what I was doing. About a year ago, I've done a bit more. And then thought, why not tell you a story about Jennifer Pan? Because it's so fascinating and it's also a Canadian crime. There's not much crime happening in Canada, but when there is, it's always strange. Like Robert Picton strange. Like Jennifer Pan strange. So let me explain you what I mean by that. Before we dive right into the core of this case, let's briefly discuss tiger parenting because it's crucial to understand this story and why any of it has happened. Tiger parenting is this Chinese American concept that sort of originates from Southeast and Southeast Asia. Why does it originate from there? Well, usually it originates with the immigrants that have moved to the US that are of Chinese descent, or it can refer to like any other country in that part of the world. But it's the concept of strict parenting that those parents that are usually immigrants enforce onto their children. And why do they enforce it? You can partially understand it because those are either refugees or immigrants that have fought all of their life to move towards the US, to move towards the American dream, to work hard themselves. And that meant that they wanted to pass that kind of work ethic onto their children. If you ever heard of the term, you might have heard more of the term tiger moms compared to tiger dads, but it's just under one umbrella of tiger parenting. And usually they do focus on their academic success, but then any extracurricular activities are also focused on succeeding, striving. So they would be put into like competitive sports, for example. Something like chess, for example, that demands them to actually still use their brain cells. So anything else that they do is equally competitive. And when it comes to school, these tiger parents would usually care about the subjects, sort of like maths, science, rather than music, for example, or art, because the subjects these parents focus on are the ones that will bring these children to study subjects like law or medicine at university and to further develop in those careers, which in turn would then bring this lifestyle that they wanted for their children to begin with. What else is known about tiger parenting is that usually the children that are heavily influenced by it and live in those families will have an enhanced experience of either anxiety or low self-esteem or depression because they are eventually going to just keep seeing themselves as failures. And if tiger parents further decide to ignore this and don't provide any coping mechanisms, then this might escalate to either further depression or suicide. Why was I talking for a couple of minutes now about tiger parenting? Because the protagonist of the story we have today, Jennifer, had one such family unit. Big Ha and Hui Han Pan were one of those classic examples of immigrant success stories that I just spoke about a few minutes ago. They were born in Vietnam and have moved to Canada in 1979. They moved to Toronto to start off their life and soon they got married, and a couple of years after that they had their two children. First came Jennifer in 1986 and then her younger brother Felix. Both Vic and Han worked for this car parts manufacturer called Magna International. Han was making tools and Vic was making car parts. So soon, because of their loyalty, because of their hard work, they started reaping the fruits of their success. By 2004, they managed to save enough to buy this huge house with 2 cars, 2 different garages for those cars, accumulate about 200,000 in the savings account, and they started heavily focusing on their children and making sure that both Jennifer and Felix followed their pathway and they never have to go through what their parents went through once they were living in Vietnam. It's interesting from this research that I couldn't find anything at all with regards to Felix and his upbringing. The focus seems to, maybe just because of the way the case is and who the case focuses on, and the fact that Felix just never spoke up of any of his. But from everything I read, the focus really was on Jennifer and what she was doing. So remember how I said with tiger parenting, the focus is really on competitive extracurricular activities. So by the age of 4, Jennifer was already enrolled into piano classes. Then they put her into figure skating as well, like on top of that. And she was apparently really good at it, even set her eyes to go to the Olympics one day, but then has tore her ligament, which kind of finished that career. And even in the elementary school, the pressure on Jennifer was intense. So on one side, yes, you might have a cupboard of like her trophies and achievements from piano, to her playing flute as well, to also her skating practices and any trophies that she got from that. But then on the other side, you have a girl who goes to school, then goes to skating practices, then comes back home at 10 p.m. and then has to do homework until midnight and then go to bed. What her parents might or might not have known is that due to this intense pressure, she started cutting herself, like little horizontal lines on her arms. It is not known whether or not they knew of this, but it didn't stop them from just intensifying this kind of lifestyle that they imposed on her. Jennifer could not go to any school dances. She could not hang out with her friends after school. Of course, there was not even a question whether she could date a guy. Her parents told her she will not date anybody until she finishes all of her studies, so after uni, in order for boys not to disrupt her studies, which should be her priority. At the end of 8th grade, she expected to be named a valedictorian. So she expected to again show up at her house with like this whole, commandment letter, another case full of medals to just display to her parents. And yet, she didn't get it. And all the way up until that point, she was following this routine. She was studying hard. She was trying to fulfill her parents' dreams and aspirations of her. So this was a huge disappointment for her. And it kind of made her think, well, what's the point? If I was to work this hard to literally have no social life, no sleep whatsoever, and still not get these rewards that are not making me happy but making my parents happy, what is the point? But people noticed also that when they would ask her like, oh, is anything wrong? Or they would just ask her like normal questions, she would always pretend like everything is completely fine. And this is when she adapted this kind of like happy mask on the surface that she would display to others, while inside she was raging. This is now the attitude Jennifer is going to enroll into the secondary school with, because she has sort of given up at this point. Like, there's too much pressure, she's not allowed to do anything fun whatsoever, and at this point her dad was kind of seen more as a tiger parent. So in this family the dynamic was Han was really strict and then Vic was kind of like a reluctant accomplice. She was more lenient, but still there was no straying away from things like coursework. So during her high school, her grades started dropping. They were still averaging at 70%, but obviously that's not going to be great for her tiger parents, except from one subject. She was really great at music. I mean, remember, she literally started studying piano when she was 4. She also played flute in this band, like as the extracurricular at her high school, so she was really good. But of course, her parents are not going to care about that. They are focused more on math, science, languages, something that will get her to a good school. This is when it all escalated, because she started faking her report cards. She would either use templates or would just straight up forge these report cards. And then something else happened which kind of changed the course of everything, in my opinion, and that's that she failed calculus, which meant that her early admission to Ryerson University that she wanted to go to was immediately revoked. But instead, Jennifer faked the admissions letter, the student card, everything, and for the next 2 years, she pretended she was going to uni every single day. This I always find so interesting because it's when we go into Looney Tunes territory, because we have so many crimes where like a criminal would get fired from their job and they couldn't go to their family and tell them, okay, no, I was actually fired. But they get up every day, put like suit and tie, and then just go sit like in a car park or somewhere for the rest of the day. Jennifer, of course, being the overachiever that she was her whole life, didn't do that. She found a job at a cafe, she was teaching like some private piano lessons during that time, but also she had to go to the local library in order to make the actual notes, because of course her parents are gonna keep an eye on everything. So she had to put the effort, just the effort, to actually make the legitimate notes as if she was studying the subjects that she was taking at this Ryerson University. At this point, Jennifer has never been to a club, has never gotten drunk, has never had a boyfriend, or just even gone on a vacation with a friend or anybody else except from her family. But that is until she decided to change at least one of those points. She told her parents, of course, to keep this charade up. She has won a scholarship to study pharmacology at University of Toronto. And obviously, I mean, it would be such an effort for you to like literally drive me up and down there every day. So in order for me not to waste any time on my studies, which is very important to me, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna stay with my friend. And she gives them like this friend's name that they knew of that lived near the university, and they never questioned it. However, this was not the friend that she was staying with, it was her boyfriend. Daniel Wong and Jennifer actually met a couple of years earlier, in year 11. Remember how they were doing those extracurricular activities where she was playing flute? And this was purely a friendship until about 2003. This is when they had a trip to Europe. So they had a trip abroad. They were performing in this hall with their band, and back then you could still smoke indoors. I mean, depending where in Europe, truly you can still smoke today. The clubbing back home is not it. It's just not it. You smell smoke. Not relevant. And Jennifer had asthma, so she suffered through like an asthma attack and just went outside to get some air and was kind of like struggling to breathe. And Daniel followed her. He figured out what was going on, followed her, gave her one of her asthma pumps, and just like sat there until she calmed down and she went through this attack. And she will later say that that changed everything. Daniel might not have been the best option for her to stay with at the time, or might not have been the best influence, let's say. Because while Jennifer was pretending to go to university, Daniel was working at this pizza shop, but he was also a known pot dealer. This is a quick sideline, but this is why you don't engage in strict parenting of any form or just tiger parenting, because your children don't make these mistakes when they're in their teens, rather when they're in their 20s. So they have nothing to learn from and know who they should live their fake life with, because they made none. They made no mistakes when they were younger. So now they're just like, this is great because this is my only option. Of course, after living her fake life for a couple of years without her parents suspecting anything, graduation for this university comes along, so she has to fake the report again, forge everything, and also she comes to the parents and says, actually, you know what, they had to limit the seating at this graduation ceremony, and I didn't want to hurt like any of your feelings. Both of you are like super important to me, Felix as well. So what I've done instead, because they only gave me one ticket, I just gave it to a friend. So as you're not coming to my graduation. Weird. And they still didn't really suspect much because they saw the paper, it had the grades on it. At this point, and I kind of feel it's important to understand, once you lie your whole life, that becomes your nature. But then you kind of get too cocky and you start becoming a pathological liar who is lying about unnecessary things. Because Jennifer actually went to her parents and told them, you know how you taught me my whole life that I need to have some extracurricular stuff going on? Well, I thought, what's better to do while studying for a college degree than also get a job at this hospital for sick children? So she said she's volunteering at this hospital. So of course, her parents are not complete mugs. So they one day just offer to drive her there, and she doesn't have any pre-planning to do, right? They just offered it on the same day because they were getting suspicious. Like, she didn't have any hospital gown, no like card, you know, nothing to like check into this hospital with, no uniform, nothing to like actually explain that she is working at this place. Funny how they bought all of the like reports and stuff that she was literally giving them for years. Like, once it's a reward, good, but this doesn't seem like it's rewarding enough. Jennifer, what's going on? So they drive her to this hospital and Jennifer just legs it out of the car. She runs inside and hides into like the waiting area for the emergencies, hides somewhere because the mom actually went to follow her. So they become really suspicious of this. This is like not her usual behavior. And now they kind of think she's lying. So the next day her mom is just like sitting on it, and she's like, wait, there's one thing we have never done. We never called that friend that Jennifer was supposedly staying with while she was studying at university. So they ring the actual friend that she said she was staying for all of these years, and the friend was like, she has not stayed here for a single day. Which, I mean, Jennifer, girl, if you're gonna lie for years, just ring up a friend, be like, can you cover for me? If they ask. You don't even have to explain the context, just be like, hey, if they ask, just say yes. My parents are strict. When her parents actually confronted her, she said like, oh yeah, I just lied about that one thing. I was definitely, you know, studying at university all this time. But her parents lost it. Like, her dad wanted to kick her out of the house immediately, but the mom kind of pled with him and decided, no, listen, let's let her stay, but, you know, make her life a living hell yet again. They forbade her from going anywhere except to teach her private piano lessons. Obviously, they took her phone, forbade her from contacting Daniel, but she figured out how to do it through her iPod. Yo, do you remember, did iPods have like messaging functions? iPods, those are the music things, right? Did they have messaging functions? How could you message somebody?
They have iCloud, you can message them.
So the iCloud existed back then as well. Because I will cut the conversation that I have just had with my husband now. You could do it because of iCloud, the way that you can do it now on laptop. So she figured out something her parents didn't, and that was that iPods had a messaging function. And then she still kept in touch with Daniel. Her dad also put a mileage tracker on her car without her knowing, obviously, to just follow if she's only going to the piano teaching location and then back. Jennifer was 24 years old at this point. While now they have again full control over her, her parents actually went and investigated her degrees and they realized, okay, she did not study uni. She failed calculus at high school. Okay, hey Jennifer, let's go again. Can you just go through calculus again? Can you maybe, you know, let's encourage you to actually go to university so the whole family doesn't see you as a failure again. And she eventually accepts it. She goes on to finish high school, but at night, what her parents didn't know is that she would still sneak out and go to see Daniel. At this point, because this was happening for years, Daniel was kind of getting fed up with the relationship. And because of how rarely they would see each other, Daniel started having a different relationship with a new girlfriend. And when Jennifer found out, she flipped. This is when, I don't know where she got this plot from, but this next part is like out of some weird ass movie that yet again I doubt her parents would have allowed her to watch. Because she goes to Daniel and she tells him, listen, my house was broken into. Yeah, this house that I live with my parents, it was broken into. It was broken in by somebody who pretended to be a police officer. They showed me their badge. But then they were followed by a group of people that group of people then gang raped me, and they left a bullet behind. And that bullet, the bullet had my name on it. It was left as a threat. And you know who sent that group of people? Your girlfriend. Your new girlfriend. Daniel, at this point, I mean, this does sound far-fetched, but he still kind of believes her because he obviously has dated her for quite some time. So he kind of goes back to her. And a few things happened around this time. One of the things being that Jennifer reconnected with one of her school friends. At first, when you hear that, you're like, well, that's great. She's reconnecting with some friends at least. She might actually have a normal life after all, you know, marry Daniel, go on and go out with these friends of hers, and just everything is gonna go well. You're here. You're the Gone Bad series. Why is your mind even going there? Literally nobody, Maya, literally nobody, whatever. Well, instead, Jennifer reconnected with this human because this person used to brag through school how he would pull up like kids at knife point and how he also killed his dad. Nobody checked into this to see whether it is correct. So she kind of connects with him and is like, you remember how you said you killed your dad? I'm kind of fed up of mine. So, you know, is it a go? Is that a plan? Like, can we talk further about this? Jennifer ended up meeting with this person and handing them about $1,500, which again she probably saved up from like her cafe work and her also doing those private piano lessons, to arrange the hit on her dad in a parking lot. But the day that the hit was supposed to happen just passed by. And then another day went by and she was like, okay, the hit is just not happening. He just took my money and left, which is pretty accurate. And you can't just call the police, be like, hey, I was actually arranging a hit on my dad with about like $1,500. The police would be like, oh yeah, we're coming right now to arrest your ass. And also, $1,500, not enough for a hit. I just don't understand things. But now that she's back with Daniel, she confides in Daniel. Daniel's like, oh my god, women trying to arrange hitman. Leave it to the man. Leave it to the man. I know exactly what to do, okay? First of all, it needs to be more money. Yeah, he was partially correct with that one. So Daniel now, because the men are gonna handle this hitman situation, then... Did you give him a nickname? Then arranges this whole situation. He hits up his known friend whose street name was Homeboy, so Hitman Homeboy, and he gives Jennifer this burner phone to get in touch with Homeboy. And they arrange that the hit is going to happen in their own house, in Jennifer's house. The way Daniel approached this was, okay, first of all, you're gonna get more money. You will get $10,000 just sort of upfront for the hit. But then also, what will happen is Jennifer is to inherit $500,000 once both of her parents are dead from their life insurance policy. You know, me and her move in, you must just get a bit more like of that money, or you know, you can be best friends for life, come here, live lavishly with us. You will soon come to realize that this plan reached only a certain point, and then the aftermath just did not even pass, did not even flash forward in their eyes on what they're going to do or say after the actual hit. Homeboy, whose name was Lanford Crawford, is communicating with Jennifer through her burner phone now, but he is also speaking with his other homeboys, Eric Carty and David Milvaganam. On November the 8th, 2010, Jennifer is in her bedroom and she is just watching TV. It was said that she was watching Gossip Girl and John and Kate Plus 8, which if there was ever a throwback, to like your teenage years, and the American shows that even I know about. I mean, Gossip Girl is a classic. The other one, very niche. So she's watching the classics and then she hears her dad walking past her around 8:30 p.m., which was his bedtime because this is a psychopathic family. Her brother Felix wasn't at home, he was at uni, so he was staying at dorms and he was actually studying his degree in engineering, so he was safe. Her mother comes around 9:30. She was line dancing and she comes back, changes into PJs, but then she sits downstairs to like still kind of watch TV in the living room. And that causes Jennifer to have this call around 9:30 with homeboy to just say, okay, we still kind of need to wait, but I'll set the plan in action right now. What she meant is, she went downstairs, said goodnight to her mother, but also as she's going back to her room, she unlocks the front door. Around 10:05, she thinks she hears her mom go upstairs to the room as well, so she gets on the burner phone with homeboy again, and she's like, okay, I think I'm giving you a sign shortly. So she goes downstairs, and the sign was for her to go into their study and flick the light switch on and off. A couple of minutes later, Milva Gunham and two other men storm through that front door, which was just left unlocked by Jennifer. They couldn't confirm 100% the identities of the two men, so that's why I'm not calling them by other names. Because later, both Daniel Wong and the homeboy will have alibis. They checked into work and they were present at their work shift. Eric Carty will later say he was only the getaway driver and he had no idea about what was going on inside. These two are now in the house. They went to the parents' bedroom, they sort of woke both of them up and they demanded money. So they started like threatening them, pointing guns at them and pointing guns at Jennifer. And they said, okay, Jennifer, you are the one that's walking us around. Like, your parents' lives, depend on it. So you walk us around and you give us any cash that you have in the house. So according to her, Jennifer is at a gunpoint and she is walking around opening different safes and giving them what's there in cash, which was around 2,000 Canadian dollars at the time. Then these intruders proceed to tie Jennifer to like the stairs, to the banister, with her shoelaces. I found this part to be really strange because usually when the robberies happen, the robbers bring stuff in that they're going to use during that robbery. Unless they know the person's home, unless it's super personal. But you don't like enter the home, look for somebody's shoes, take the shoelaces out, and then tie your victims with shoelaces. Now that she's tied to the banister, these intruders are walking her parents towards the basement. And they will later recall as they were walking back, her mom, she pled for them to save Jennifer's life. They walk them both in the basement, they cover their faces with a blanket, and they just start shooting rounds. After this, they just left, they just fled the scene. And Jennifer, on this banister, she manages to reach through to the phone that's in her back pocket and dial 911. Once the ambulance and the police makes it to the house, they immediately go to the basement and they find out that her mom was actually dead on the scene. But with Han, they transported him to the Markham Hospital, so their local hospital, but then he had to be transported with one of those aircrafts to the hospital in Toronto because this hospital just couldn't even deal with the wounds that he had. And the police officers are now on the scene. The couple of them take Jennifer to interrogate her and they're just looking at it and they're like, this makes no sense. They look at this shoelace and where Jennifer was tied and they're like, how did she make a phone call? First of all, why use a shoelace? But also, how did she, with her hands tied behind her back, go into the pocket, dial 911 and then talk to us like we could hear her? It wasn't like, that she had to have her hands behind her, like it was a completely normal phone call. Then as they're walking around, they go back to that front door. They're like, there's just no sign of forced entry at all. Also, there's like the keys to the cars on like the desk next to the door. Why did they just leave this robbery with $2,000 when there's two expensive cars just left outdoors? Why not take the cars as well and sell them? I mean, in my opinion, that would be risky because obviously you can get traced with license plates immediately. But to the police, it looked like if this was a robbery gone wrong, then they would have gotten away with those cars as well. But most importantly, out of everything, why was Jennifer alive? Not just alive, but like completely unharmed. Like her parents were brutally murdered and they just left this child tied to the banister, no bruise, no nothing at all. So first time that they interrogate Jennifer, of course she's in distress, like they're sort of giving her some slack because her whole family was just brutally attacked, and she's telling them how, she called 911, she's explaining all of that to her. They're immediately suspicious of her, and they assign somebody to follow her. Only a few days later, on November the 12th, her dad woke up from coma. And Han, even though he had bullets in his face, like he had one bullet like right next to his eye, he had another one grazing his neck. Different bullet fragments lodged into his face that doctors couldn't even remove with surgery, but his memory was unshattered. He immediately told the police, "My daughter is who you should be looking into." It just seemed like she was leading these robbers as if she was their friend. They were just having friendly chats, and also when they were going around the house, she did not have her hands tied behind her back at all. Now that happened later, so I think that she is in on it. The police again brings Jennifer in, and they're like, "Listen, we know it's you, can you just like drop the act?" There are multiple hours of footage of this online if you want to listen. There's like literally channels with like 4 or 5 hours of footage. I was like, no. But Jennifer, during this interrogation, says, "But what about me?" And they're like, "You're like alive and well, like your mom is dead, you're showing zero emotions, little child. Your dad is in grave conditions and he is saying that you behave this way." To which she said, "I can't believe I'm being blamed. This is definitely a suicide gone wrong." They're like, say what? A suicide? She's like, "Yeah, I hired homeboy to kill me. You didn't see that coming." So they're like, "Okay, homeboy, your friend from school, he must be the dumbest killer ever, because you see, he goes into the house, he makes you, the intended victim, rob your own family, then he drives your parents to the basement, kills both of them, but ties you to the banister, and then just leaves the place without killing you, the intended victim." And she's like, oh yeah, didn't think about that one really in depth, did I? But soon, even without Jennifer confessing or saying that she is guilty, the police did have enough. Because they went through every single room in that house and they found all of the hidden phones. You see, Jennifer had her murder phone, her iPhone, and then her Samsung phone, which was her nice, cute little Jennifer phone. So on her murder phone, they discover everything from start to finish, starting off with her arranging this hit with Homeboy. Their texts around the sum of money, so Crawford saying, "Well, actually, I charge about 20k, but friends and family discount, I can give you this hit for about 10k. Then the next conversation on the murder phone goes something like this. It's again with Homeboy, and he says, "Well, actually, perfect cover for me to kind of scout the location would be Halloween. I can be in a costume, there are kids trick-or-treating around your house, and I can just come in. You kind of just let me into the hallway, because we know your parents won't let kids or anybody else past it, but you let me through the hallway and I can sort of see the direction we should be going in on the night, and then I can advise the other two." Further conversations are from November the 2nd, again on her murder phone, and those are her chats with Daniel, her boyfriend. Because again, Daniel is trying to move on. He is telling her, well, actually, he's in love with somebody else, he's dating somebody else now. But Jennifer won't take it. It seemed like Daniel was again trying to start up a relationship with somebody else, but Jennifer was not on it. She was like, "No, we agreed on this, you were in on this plan." To which Daniel replied, "Well, I thought you were doing this for yourself." And Jennifer's reply was like, "Yes, but I have nowhere else to go." But then between the 2nd and the 8th of November, when the attack happened, there were plenty of other conversations with Danielle on her Samsung, the nice Jennifer phone as well, and it just seems like they made up. They were boyfriend and girlfriend again, everything was all chatty and flirty. Then we go back to the murder phone, to the last sets of conversations, followed by calls to the homeboy. So a couple of days before the 8th, the Penn family actually went out for dinner. So homeboy was texting her being like, hey, is it a go tonight? And she said like, no, actually we have dinner plans. We'll be home too late for what we arranged. But then on the 8th, there is a last text message followed by the calls. This message came from homeboy to Jennifer: after work, okay, it will be game time. The trial for this didn't actually start until 2014, and it lasted 10 months. So at this point, Jennifer was actually taking the stand, and she was claiming that she was not guilty for attempted murder, first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder. None of that. She actually said, no, I did kind of plan it. I had like a rough idea in my head, but then I have definitely called it off by November time. So I don't know what these kids have done, but if they have broken into my house, that's on them. I had nothing to do with that. I called it off. And by this point, the police, the public, the press, everybody saw Jennifer as pretty emotionless human being, like as this evil daughter. But her defense decided to use this into her favor. Because, you see, why was Jennifer emotionless? Why did Jennifer not cry at her mother's funeral? Why was Jennifer not showing any emotion towards her dad and her brother that are behind us today? Well, because she was emotionally abused by those same people, which is why we are here today. But whatever defense was to say in this case, the prosecution just had 10 times more to pile up over that. Everything from the extensive text messages and just call history in the days before the murder, but literally it was just painting a whole picture, as I told you now, from the very beginning of the communications till the very end. Then there was the police report from the scene of the crime on that evening and all of the irregularities that we went through, from the shoelace to how she made that 911 call, to how she was unharmed, to the fact that this was never intended to be a robbery in the first place, but a hit. And then finally, on top of all of that, as the cherry on the top, they had her dad's testimony. Because her dad actually testified against her in trial and contradicted everything that Jennifer said on the stand, telling the true version of events. In December 2014, Jennifer, Daniel, Milvaganam, and Crawford, or Homeboy, all were found to be guilty and were given life sentence without the possibility of parole for 25 years. Eric Carty actually had a mistrial. I think it was something due to his attorneys being sick, something along those lines. But then he was retried and was sentenced to 18 years in prison. Because remember, he was just a getaway driver, but still, he knew about the plan and he has done nothing to prevent it. This is truly one of those nobody wins situations, because her dad and brother actually went through and submitted a court order, which was accepted, that they never wanted to be contacted by Jennifer ever again. And she was by court also forbidden to speak to Daniel. So she is in prison right now and she has nobody. Her family is not visiting her. I doubt any of her friends or whatever, because she had none in school ever visited her. And well, she can't really correspond with other hitmen or her boyfriend in prison either. This is just a bummer story all around. I saw this from an interview with her. I think it might have been the police interrogation, and it's when they asked her about her lies in particular, because as you remember, she never said she was guilty for any of this. And she would say that in her head she would rationalize lying as the only way out, like she had to keep going, or she thought she would lose everything that meant anything to her. In this particular case, you can see the display of that during those 6 days between November the 2nd and November the 8th. And in particular when she is communicating to Daniel, because she is so dependent on this one person, because he was there for her while she was trying to escape her family all of this time. He was the one solid constant, and she sort of probably associated him with freedom. And that's one sad part, that due to the way she was parented, she couldn't possibly see that that's not what Daniel was, that there was life beyond that. and that she didn't have to do any of this. It reminds me of the rationalization people go through when they, instead of like going through a divorce or something shameful, they decide to instead murder somebody because they never think they're gonna get caught for it. So they think they're gonna get away, and then there's no shame. Everybody pities them. Everybody's like, oh my god, poor person. So she must have thought everybody's just gonna pity her, and then they're gonna be like, okay, cool, at least she continued with her life, and then she was gonna live in this house with Daniel and just live her happy life, enjoying $500,000 and never have to feel the pressure at any point in her life again. But instead, she went from one prison to the other. And that is the bummer of a story of Jennifer Pan. I don't know about you, but this was a lot lighter in my head, like the way I remembered it when researching, than when I actually tell you the story, because it's just a no-winning situation. Like, the parent is left without one child and their own wife, and then the child is just left by herself yet again, which is something she desperately tried to avoid her whole life. If there's a single case where the punishment is truly deserving of the crime, that is truly here. I'm not trying to justify her. I'm just saying you need to rationalize things, you need to put the pros and cons, make those lists, pros and cons, on the sheet of paper. You can't just like try to escape one prison and not think how to escape the other. Like not think of the aftermath of like actually having bare evidence on you, having murder phone. But hey, if there's a single case that should demotivate you from doing crime ever in your life, it's this one. Like, I hope you're all here, I hope you all listen to it, and I hope you never even try, you never even attempt. You never even get to the stage when you're about to call something off. No, don't do it, people will snitch on you. Don't associate yourself with homeboys, that is the moral of this story. I'm gonna see you next week. I'm not sure if it's gonna be Gone Bad or Last Meals. One or the other. It will happen. Meet me here at this channel. Subscribe and like. You know the jazz. See you then. With another mindfuck. For now, bye. Bye. They started reaping the fruits of their success. Is that an expression? I don't know. Is it? Just go along, pretend like, pretend like it is. Just pretend like nothing happened. Just go. Look at the camera, go on. Well, he was playing a trumpet in the school band. He was a boy, she was a girl. Can I get any more obvious? It was a punk. She did ballet. What more can I say? Never sing. Never. This is not a career you're to purchase. What? Purchase? Pursue. Pursue. You don't purchase. You don't buy a career.